School staff are largely equipped to develop learning activities and to support their students as they make their way at their own pace through the school learning environment. However, isolation is resulting in considerable changes in their daily tasks and in their role as professionals. They now have to try to support their students remotely, but they also have to provide support for parents and guardians. Of course, the type of support offered to parents and guardians will vary depending on the circumstances. In this presentation, we will discuss the family-centered approach, its benefits, and its different components. This approach will be very important at this time when teaching staff must work closely with parents and guardians. We will discuss the importance of showing empathy and compassion in order to build positive relationships with families and find ways to promote collaboration. We will conclude by discussing the roles of teaching staff and those of the parents and guardians. In addition to having access to this recording, you will have access to a handout that includes the essential information contained in this presentation along with a sample scenario. A family-centered approach is based on the individual strengths of each child and family and actively include families and parents in the planning and the decision-making related to student learning. This approach is tailored to each family. When you use a family-centered approach, you are better equipped to develop strategies adapted to each family. This means that the objectives and strategies identified are more likely to make life easier for families, address specific challenges, and create the best possible environment for the health, development, and well-being of children. For example, one family may have several opportunities for learning and development outdoors, surrounded by nature, and another family might have limited opportunities to go outside or to spend time outdoors. You must be able to recognize these differences and adjust objectives and strategies to each family situation. A family-centered approach is used by different professionals in different contexts. In education, we often refer to a student-centered approach. Identifying the strengths, challenges, and the needs of each student is a common practice that make it possible to meet students' needs appropriately. During this time, when students are at home, we have to bring parents, guardians, and families into the equation. Besides, parents and guardians are the ones who best understand the needs of their child at this time and who are in the best position to guide them towards achieving positive results. This approach gives parents and guardians more confidence because they are very much more involved in all aspects of the intervention. Also, they are more proactive and independent when they respond to the developmental needs of their children. Here are the different components that promote a family-centered approach. In this presentation, we will discuss each component in detail. Before anything else, what matters most is to establish a partnership with the family. You will then be able to identify learning objectives together with the family and select the actions and strategies that will be carried out to achieve those objectives. Next, you will have to clarify the roles of each individual according to the needs that were identified. And last of all, we will provide feedback and support for the parents and guardians. Now, let us look at each of these components in more detail. You probably already built relationships with the parents and guardians of your students during the school year, but those relationships will most likely change a bit during this period. While you would normally be in the field with your students, seeing them every day, you are now limited to phone conversations or virtual meetings. In addition to supporting your students, you must now guide and support parents and guardians who are working very closely with their children while they continue their learning at home. This is not a transition that is easy or simple. A family-centered approach is based on the fact that a partnership has been established between the professionals and the family. In other words, you are all working towards a common goal, the well-being of the child. First and foremost, this is about listening to needs. The goal is to gather information about the strengths, interests, and challenges of the child, but also those of the family. A family-centered approach seeks to empower parents and guardians and to engage them in their child's learning. Building positive relationships with them is essential. In the current situation, some families may face challenges that did not exist before. Yet changes in routine could mean that the situation is more positive for other families. It is important to approach communications with an open mind and not to assume that you know the strengths or challenges or the needs of the families you support. When questioning parents and guardians in relation to the strengths and needs, do not limit yourself to the academic field. Think about language and communication skills, social skills, life skills, leisure, and daily activities. Certain factors may interfere with building positive relationships with parents and guardians. We will look at 5 different factors and we will then discuss possible solutions for overcoming challenges. To start with, using overly technical language might be aversive to parents and guardians. It might even give the impression that the staff member is adopting an authoritarian attitude rather than an attitude that allows for collaboration and flexibility. It is important to be sensitive to what parents and guardians are going through at this time. The vast majority of them are probably unfamiliar with or do not understand the technical terms commonly used by teaching staff. It might then be easy to focus on challenges or things that aren't going so well. The situation we are going through at the moment is not an easy one, and it's normal for families to be facing challenges and to feel overwhelmed. Ask about the things that are going well and try to help parents and guardians find positive things about their situation. For some, communicating with parents and guardians might be difficult and could lead to feelings of powerlessness and vulnerability. However, negative thoughts about oneself or about one's performance are one of the barriers to building positive relationships with families. The last identified barrier to a positive relationship is the lack of sensitivity to family values. Each family is clearly experiencing the present situation differently, and we must be sensitive to the different realities. Here are some possible solutions for overcoming challenges when you're trying to build positive relationships with parents and guardians. Let's start with the first 2 barriers, using overly technical language or adopting an authoritarian attitude. Active listening is certainly a common practice among teaching staff. However, in the current circumstances, empathetic listening will also be helpful in building relationships of trust with parents and guardians. It might be helpful to accept information without passing judgment, repeat or paraphrase words to ensure you have understood, identify and verbalize the other person's emotions, be aware of your own emotions while you are listening, and avoid projecting your emotions onto others. And finally, taking breaks so everyone can reflect, organize their thoughts, or regain control over their emotions. Now, let's go over a few questions that will help you find out about the strengths and interests of the child and their family. This will help you to avoid putting the emphasis on challenges or problems. For example, you could ask, what are the child's successes? During which activity does the child experience the most success? How does the child spend his free time? Or what are your successes as a family? During which activity does your family experience the most success? How do you spend your free time? Of course, during the different conversations with parents and guardians, the school staff will have to take note of the different challenges experienced by the child and their family. Teaching staff may well feel powerless or even incapable of meeting the needs of families at this time. During this difficult period, the most important relationship we have is the one we have with ourselves. This relationship will enable all the other relationships to flourish. It is therefore important to show yourself a bit of compassion. In other words, we must observe and be attentive to our own emotions and feelings. We will also have to be kind to ourselves and recognize that we are all experiencing a bit of stress at this time. We must try not to judge ourselves and avoid criticizing ourselves. By trying to remain connected to others, we acknowledge that we are not the only ones who are feeling all these emotions. Feel free to share your worries or concerns with people you trust, such as your coworkers, your friends, or your principal. A family-centered approach considers the individual realities of each family. It will therefore be important to recognize and to be sensitive to their values. We have already talked about the importance of empathetic listening and seeing things through another person's perspective. So compassion and empathy, they go hand in hand. A person who shows compassion is acting intentionally to validate the other person's feelings. In other words, besides recognizing and validating how the other person feels, we can make ourselves available to help that person. Here are a few compassion-related skills that can help in building positive relationships with parents and guardians and with families. Plan breaks and times in the conversation for the parents and guardians to say how they feel. Confirm the emotional response of parents and guardians without passing judgment. Discuss how, as a team, the concerns of parents and guardians could be addressed. And be understanding of what parents and guardians are going through by offering supportive comments. Once you have built a positive relationship with the parents and guardians and gathered information about the strengths and the interests, you can identify the child's learning objectives in collaboration with the family. In some cases, the learning objectives that were worked on at school may no longer apply in this new context or may no longer be a priority. You will therefore have to identify, with parents and guardians, and with the student if possible, learning objectives that are meaningful and that meet the needs of the child and of the child's family in the current circumstances. The first question you may want to ask is, what objectives would the student like to prioritize? Or what objectives would the family like to work on? Some families will have an immediate answer to this question, while others will need a bit of guidance. We will look at a few ways of providing a family with guidance on the next slide. But for families who do share with you the objectives they would like to work on, make sure you fully understand the objectives and, if possible, the reasons why they want to work on them. Here are a few questions that might help you guide your discussion while identifying with families the learning objectives to be prioritized. You may ask, are there any concerns about the student's safety? Does the student have a mean for communicating his wants and needs? Are there missing prerequisite skills that are impacting learning? Does the student need help with basic self-care? What are the learner's career or life readiness objectives? Or what teaching resources and opportunities are available in the current environment? These questions may help you to prepare a needs profile. It will be important to consider the teaching resources and opportunities that are available. How much time can a parent or guardian spend on supporting their child each day? Or what materials are available to families? Do they have access to other types of support, such as a speech-language pathologist or a service in the community? These factors will help in setting objectives that are realistic and achievable. Once the objective or objectives have been identified, you will have to choose actions or strategies that the parent and guardian will be able to carry out with their child. You will probably have to be creative and use your store of educational knowledge to convert actions or strategies implemented in a school context into actions and strategies that can be implemented by parents and guardians in a family context. This is not an easy task. That is why it is important to have established a partnership with parents and guardians and to communicate with them openly. Ask yourself the question, if I were teaching this concept at school, how would I go about it? Think about the different strategies you know and ask the parents or guardians if they have any ideas. Could any of them be applied to this context? Of course, most parents and guardians do not have teacher training, so you may have to adjust the proposed activities depending on the individual strengths of each family. Start with simple activities so the parents and guardians of the child experience success. Check whether expectations are reasonable and whether parents or guardians are comfortable with the suggestions. So at this point, you have identified the objectives that will be worked on and the actions and strategies that parents and guardians will be able to carry out, all in a spirit of collaboration. You will now have to plan how the different strategies will be implemented. It will be helpful to discuss the roles of each person so that you and the parents and guardians will know exactly what to expect. The role clarifying exercise should also be done in collaboration with parents and guardians. The example we are proposing here is just an example, and it can be changed to meet the individual needs of each family. Teaching staff could share the information about the proposed actions or strategies. They could share it during telephone conversations or by email if appropriate and possible. Also, teaching staff could provide explanations to parents and guardians and even do a demonstration or some modeling of a particular strategy. Parents and guardians could share information or resources as well. They may have excellent resources that could be used during this time when children are learning at home. Parents and guardians will then have to try out some experiences with their child and share their successes and obstacles with the member of the teaching staff. Here again, the relationship of trust between the staff member and the parents or guardians will be essential. Parents and guardians may be in a vulnerable position, and it will be important for the member of the teaching staff to be supportive and to provide feedback. Active listening, empathy, and compassion will certainly be required. Last of all, problems will be solved jointly. Teaching staff and parents and guardians will have to try to come up with solutions for overcoming the different obstacles. Once again, dive into your store of knowledge and experience and show some creativity. Ask parents and guardians for their opinions and check in with your coworkers. The feedback and support you offer families will vary depending on the needs. An empathetic approach that takes into account the values and the realities of each family will certainly be a plus. You will have to decide on the frequency of your communications and follow up with the parents and guardians. Here are some helpful tips. Stress the positive aspects and efforts that have been made. Always begin your feedback with a positive comment. Avoid drawing conclusions or making assumptions. Ask a parent directly how they feel about everything that's going on and how their child is doing. Is the proposed strategy effective and productive? And be prepared to hear positive and negative comments. Give constructive feedback or suggest possible solutions depending on the situation. Use your professional judgment to determine whether the parent or guardian could benefit from some possible solutions or constructive criticism. Gauge the reaction of the parents or guardians and adjust your feedback accordingly. Ask parents and guardians how you can help them. If the parent or guardian shares obstacles or challenges they faced, ask them directly if there's something you can do. If the parent or guardian is unsure of possible solutions, try to come up with something together. Offer non-judgmental support. Like you, parents and guardians are navigating their way through this situation the best they can. If you encounter a problem, remember that you're not alone. Communicate with your coworkers or your principal. Above all, try to find a solution in collaboration with the families. To guide the discussion, you could ask questions such as, how do you think this problem can be solved? Or what strategies have you tried in the past that have worked? Or what might contribute to your well-being as a family at this time? A family-centered approach makes it possible to empower parents and guardians and engage them in their child's learning. It is an approach based on collaboration and on establishing a real partnership between teaching staff and families, and then being able to identify the learning objectives to be prioritized and to select actions or strategies for achieving those objectives. The learning environment will be different. Your role as a member of the teaching staff will also change. The learning objectives of your students will probably change as well. You will have to show some creativity and innovation to guide parents and guardians through this unusual period. While you try out new experiences, celebrate success stories with parents and guardians and with your students. Consult your coworkers and share your experiences. But most importantly, be kind to yourself. Allow yourself to make mistakes and do not seek perfection. You are making a difference. We invite you to consult the handout for a scenario that might serve as an example. Great success to you all, and thank you for all your efforts.